Okay, so we're now halfway through lesson two of Pathway to Ascension Volume 1, or Professional Course, Lesson 2, PC2, if you're using the booklets, booklet number 2. And that brings us to Confronting Existence as It Is. Being midway through, Lesson 2 also brings us midway through Level 0, in case you're wondering. That Level 0 extends three lessons, and then we make up for it. Level 1 is actually just one super long lesson. So confronting as it is, we've actually talked about some of this in the basic course. We've kind of covered the idea about confronting, that it has negative connotations in modern language. We tend to refer to someone who is quick to exhibit anger with others as being confrontational, but that's really only partly demonstrating what the word means. And it really means to come around to the front, or to come around to face, or basically to just stand, in front of and confront as it is. So, like, as a perspective, the individual alpha spirit as a perspective, confronting something, And by this, we're not necessarily talking about any kind of flow in regards to it. We talked about circuits before, simply the ability to confront it. And in some ways, we've been lightly but directly, confronting objects, emotions, states of minds throughout level 0 already. We are demonstrating that we have control over our experiences of something, and that to maintain that control, to actually have self-determined control, is to not to avoid. So by standing in front of, or confronting, coming around to face up to, we're neither approaching nor withdrawing. We're simply beholding whatever it is as it is, without any and this concept of as it is we've brought up several times already too, since the beginning of the basic course. So the first basic confront process, and this is in archaic New Thought. If you go back to the early 1900s, you'll find this referred to as concentering. But the most basic processes, and this includes all of the ones that we're introducing in level 0, they're often misunderstood as being too elementary or unimportant to be practiced properly. So if you do, the idea is to practice confronting existence as it is. That means free of automatic associations, other reactivity, any kind of reactive responses, the kind of circuitry we've been hinting around about that the mind is, kind of concerned about, and what it makes up. But, this is a critical component of the pathway, and the idea of being able to confront existence as it is, this isn't something that just happens all at once either. Just as, the blockages to this crystal clear, self-honest view did not always seem so solid. That happened gradually as well. So, and when we look at something as it is, and most of us are not in the practice of doing this, so really, the alpha spirit's no longer really in the practice of confronting any kind of existence as it is. It's using relays. It's using the human condition as a relay, as a via, as a catalyst. And so really, there's kind of this connectivity of beingness being located in the head, and then of course using the body to confront existence, to confront what's being viewed, what's being seen. And so when we look at something as it is, we are essentially confronting it. And the ability to do this is what we talk about when we mean self-honesty, that the associations, reactivity are no longer a part of the equation of us filtering that experience. And this is a practice skill. This isn't something that happens all at once. This isn't even, the ultimate goal of level 0. This is something that we improve as we go further along the pathway. So, not unlike those states that are sought through traditional forms of meditation, to confront, we're practicing by simply looking at something with all of our presence and attention without any distraction, either from the body, from the surrounding environment, or any kind of thought activity and so forth. And this is, again, another practice towards increasing personal ability to provide greater presence and focused attention. Of course, we're always working towards increasing actualized awareness. If we consider, a practice with this as a basic terminal, and existence, we again composed of many different terminals and so forth. So there's a practice it's in the Tibetan tradition, is where they refer to it as sitting face to face, which a seeker can best practice with a partner. And this doesn't necessarily have to be a co-pilot, but with a partner. And it's similar to practice with anything. Some of the mystics used to have their students practice it, on a candle flame in an empty room and such. It's probably the more interesting approaches to this that we have found involves, again, sitting face to face, which is performed simply sitting across from another person and without talking or giving in to reactions. And if a solo practitioner, if necessary, can still, you could still do this with an object or a terminal, so long as you have it present in front of you. But what's important is to be able to extrovert your attention, to project it to the point that's outside and away from where you perceive your own beingness, whether it's the body or the mind, or what we would prefer it to be, as Zoo Vision, the actual beingness of the Alpha Spirit. Because when we refer to beingness, ultimately the true beingness of the Alpha Spirit is this spiritual point that's exterior and external to all creation universes, that it's using other vehicles now to operate. When it misidentifies itself, its own beingness, its own concept of self as the body then becomes what is the perceived beingness of the spirit. It's what they're operating from exclusively. They're no longer operating as an alpha spirit, as a remote individual, an individual beingness remote from the body. They're operating as though it's from the body. So this is easily practiced, again, using bodies as terminals, because that's what we're accustomed to. Now, in the process of doing this for prolonged periods of time, other things and other perceptions may arise, and other, what we referred to earlier as realizations. So when you're practicing the confronting, now we've talked about some basic practices earlier in this lesson and the former lesson, but when you're practicing confronting, unlike the previous process where we are making a copy of distractive thoughts and emotions as a practice of getting them under our control, this exercise is not concerned with addressing each distraction as a thing, but rather ignoring them altogether and refocusing attention exactly where you want it. So again, in doing so, in actually maintaining, eye contact with another individual, not giving into emotions, not talking, not, doing anything or whatnot, and just sitting there, with full awareness and attention. There's other things that can stir up. Just again, just while quietly sitting and maintaining eye contact with someone. So that's something that has to be really practiced. But if any discomfort, emotional reactions, or intruding thoughts stir up or turn on while performing this process, simply maintain the focus of your attention outwards until they simmer down. Our mascots discovered one of their squeaking toys underneath somebody's chair. Are we going to be able to proceed there, sweetie? Okay. And there's a good example there of, shifting attention off of something that would be a fail in this type of process. You want to be able to maintain basically full attention and awareness without any kind of reaction or break in attention, regardless of what happens within the environment. There's other ways of practicing this, actually, which brings up an interesting point I probably wouldn't have, actually, where someone's being coached and their ability to confront and just kind of tolerate and confront activity and so forth is tested by being having jokes being told at them and various things, or someone acting, the rule there basically being that they can do anything except touch the individual. So anything that might spur a reaction, that is short of actually, physically being involved with the individual to get a reaction. And then, of course, trying to work up the ability to confront and maintain one's presence and composure regardless of what takes place. So you can thank our four-legged mascot, because otherwise I probably wouldn't even have brought that up this early or at all in the pathway. Again, we experimented with many things that actually are not included in this, and there's as much as the lessons and the volumes are concerning Pathway to Ascension, there's a dozen more research and development volumes that are behind that, and it's no longer, unless you're very studious about approaching every single gradient taught at the Mardukite Academy, it's no longer for New Standard Systemology. The Fundamentals of Systemology basic course and the Pathway to Ascension standard course or professional course is pretty much what you need, and of course you can always dig deeper. So to back up to where we were before, if any discomfort, emotional reactions, intruding thoughts, so forth, turn on while processing this, just simply maintain your attention outwards until they simmer down or turn off. And this is something, again, that's going to be practiced. There's many times in life when you need to persist or handle something in spite of distractions, and the ability to do this clearly without losing focus is an important skill for optimum survival, and also practice for our spiritual ability to create. So, this can be practiced until you're able to achieve the results effortlessly for a few minutes at will. And then afterwards, if you're running this in a processing session, afterwards you can reapply the control of mind-body process used in the opening procedures of the formal session, which we reintroduced in lesson 1. And you can reapply all that and see if it yields different results for you. And, so that you're not having to scrounge about for that. The PCL for that particular process is put all your attention on the upper back corners of the room, keep your attention there, and ignore all distractions. The pathway to ascension, as we have sequentially demonstrated it in the New Standard Systemology, it begins with a lot of what I have introduced to you as objective universe processing, which means the external environment as it's generally agreed to, as it's generally perceived among, those sharing the human condition. So, and the purpose of these processes was really to extrovert attention and get a practice on focusing it external to the body and on the objective universe. It isn't necessarily to further solidify, our reality agreements to the universe. Those we begin to break down as we go along. But in order to break those reality agreements down, we first must be able to treat and handle, self-honestly to the extent that we can, treat and handle the objective universe. So that's why, and it involves objects and doing various things, and it's, as I was mentioning in the previously in this lesson or the previous lesson, that it's important to alternate, with objective processing when you're doing a lot of these mental steps and anything involving extended periods of, imaginative creativity and so forth, mental imagery. So the truth of the matter is, now that we've gotten through a lesson and a half of objective processing, the truth of the matter is that the majority of the processing used on the pathway actually concerns the subjective universe. Basically that which is specific to the individual themselves, that which is basically their own personal universe, so to speak, and of which agreements, of course, of other sources have been superimposed on in order to have a shared existence with others. But the personal universe is just as real to the individual as what is being agreed to out there as the physical material universe. Again, those agreements that make our automated compulsive perception of the material universe, those agreements are essentially inherent into the human condition, and so that's what we are compulsively seeing. So, one of the ways in which we kind of bring this, and I'll put this up there, it's not necessarily its own methodology. You still apply it the same as anything else. It just kind of is a way of classifying. But conceptual processing, that's one way, that's just a term we give, one way in which we are treating, a basic way of treating what I've essentially just been talking about, the way in which a seeker considers or conceives or gets a sense of the concepts that are around. We've talked a lot about terminals and objects. Now we can kind of examine more of the concepts. And again, we were talking about as it is. Now these concepts, the way they are viewed and the way they're associated with various things, of course, may or may not be, anything close to what the actual nature of that thing is as it is. So what we are treating next, as introducing at level 0 here, is the idea of now processing one's conceptual universe or conceptual perception of their personal universe. So it's integral through the rest of the course, and so it's important that we introduce it in among these earliest lessons. So and it's definitely important to know about if you're going to be flying solo, for sure, without experienced assistance, because most of the objective processing that has been introduced up to this point, there's a lot of leeway with, and you can get away with a lot in playing with it, as far as that's not necessarily stirring anything up directly that is going to cause you any issues. But when we start examining the concepts that we've attached to various things, it's usually the ones that we dislike the most that we tend to steer away from or withdraw from, or seem to have some bite on us. So, you know, but I should mention systematic processing is not a form of meditation or psychotherapy. And it almost certainly is not freewheeling thought. So where an individual just kind of skips from one thought to another or lingers compulsively on one. And that's one of the reasons why experienced piloting can sometimes be of an assistance here, because an individual has a tendency on their own. The reason why we've established, the formal session script and these various methods of systematic processing is because all of the other previous methods that have been used, and including the New Age, spiritual, and self-help and psychological and so forth, they allow for either too much freewheeling thought where something isn't being processed properly and it's just one thought skipping to another, or really no way of handling a thought that one wants to withdraw from, is reactively withdrawing from. They'll just move on to something else. It never actually gets handled. And the other element is the obsessively dwelling on, we referred to as the compulsively created image, or the quote-unquote stuck picture in the previous lesson, or previously in this lesson. And so the purpose behind systematic processing is to avoid these traps, the freewheeling thought and so forth. And we talked about the difference earlier at the beginning of this lesson, at the beginning of the hour, the difference between the thinkingness and knowingness and so forth. So it isn't a lot of that either. And because when working solo, it doesn't help to start essentially spinning in on endless cycles of thinkingness. That's ultimately going to leave you more confused, or at the very least less certain of your ability and your progress in using the processing on the pathway. So it's the certainty and that brighter feel good that we've kind of established with practicing the objective processing. That's what's going to kind of help you carry on through the rough spots, so to speak. So this is why we are introducing this stuff kind of in this order. So to avoid stimulating anything significant, we'll introduce subjective processing with a neutral example that would not otherwise appear in a session and shouldn't have any real significant mental charge or emotional turbulence attached to it. In this case, a pilot would either give the PCL, and again, this is just an example. A pilot would either give the PCL, or a seeker would read the PCL while in session. Think of a fruit. And now the seeker would either communicate or write down all the answers that come to mind from this. And the two-way communication, or the writing if solo, it assists in keeping the seeker from getting too introverted or spun in on such a subjective process, because something like that is, think of a fruit, far different than touch that wall or pick up that object, something of that nature. So now we're talking about subjective, where a PCL is given, and rather than a physical action, behavioral, observable behavior is being carried out for the command. This is something that's, again, internal. And so that's where we separate objective processing versus subjective processing. So at first in this example, a seeker might have to orient themselves or internally process the command line for a moment, and then the initial answer or response to the mental inquiry to the command line might be, for example, a cherry. And so this would be communicated or be written the moment it comes to mind. And this allows that cycle to get acknowledged, that the seeker is free to basically come up with another answer. And, in a listing exercise like this, an individual might just acknowledge the answer, and write it down and go to the next and go to the next. Sometimes PCLs can be repeated if necessary to kind of refocus or reorient it. But the endpoint here is where you essentially would feel good about thinking of fruits. Now, if this were a process regarding something with fragmentation attached to it, there would initially be some noticeable difficulty or resistance in running the PCL, or the answers wouldn't make sense or would be about something else. So, systematic processing increases a seeker's certainty and being able to push through the mental barriers and regain control of that emotional turbulence. So, let's see, and we've already covered what fragmentation is, but an example of fragmentation, if we're processing our example, would be like spinning in on free thought that concerns the nature or definition of what a fruit is and so forth. This is one of the reasons, a pilot will make certain that the seeker understands the words being used in the PCL immediately prior to using it in processing. So when we say think of a fruit, it's bound to stir up a lot of. We talked earlier at the beginning of the lesson about associative knowledge versus seeing something as it is, and so this is an example of being able to see some of the differences on that, because it's really the free thought, and what I refer to as freewheeling thought. It's what takes place due to associations and unfocused attention. For example, a seeker answers or writes cherry and then starts internally asking themselves questions about cherry pies, which leads to wondering if they are hungry and so on, and if such and such a store is open still, or a diner is open so they can get something to eat. This is the kind of thought trail or so forth that this is not processing. So that's just the kind of way in which thought trails go off, but that's not processing. And so we spend a lot of time at the basic course and all throughout level 0 establishing an individual's ability to either be processed or process themselves in either case. So an individual that's being co-piloted, if they're not doing well with objective processing, a responsible pilot, or one that wants to do good by our name, isn't going to start introducing subjective processing unless they can demonstrate that they can actually execute some basic PCLs in a way that's observable. So, and again, we're focusing in this course on those that are flying solo. And even if you have a study group or so forth, it may not be that you're co-piloting with one another. It's maybe a group of individuals that are all flying solo. We've seen this being studied, all over the globe, actually, in various ways and by various individuals with different backgrounds. So, but when we're talking about fragmentation, and I mentioned waveforms, we're talking about fragmentation. Fragmentation is, an erratic, compulsive, flow, a waveform that's essentially not under an individual's control. So you have an individual and whatever the terminal is, we'll say the alpha spirit and a terminal. But when we're defragmenting something, we're basically we're basically flattening this erratic wave of charge or turbulence, and as we're not going to get into water currents and so forth, but anyone who's had any familiarity with, the way pressures are, or if you've, seen the rapids of a river or so forth, it's not so much the presence of water or current, but a lot of debris and rocks and blockages and so forth that steeply divert the water and cause it to rush about as it does. So the goal of processing, again, is to basically flatten the wave of any of the tendencies, the automated tendencies that are presented there between the individual and really any terminal. If ascension was dependent on us basically flattening them on every single potential terminal and defragmenting, every single imprint individually across our countless existences, we probably wouldn't actually be able to make it in this lifetime. Fortunately, all we really have to do, and it's why the pathway that we've established is graded the way it is, all we really have to do is get an individual into the first the practice of, and then basically having the second nature ability from that practice to handle and self-determine these various things for themselves. So there's a juncture where control of the body, control of the mind, the ability to act as an actualized alpha spirit, what some traditions have referred to as ascended masters. So at the very least we know it is possible. But this is what they have been. This is what they've actually been hitting upon in bits and pieces, and we've been able to codify and basically be able to structure as an incremental way. Because these guys, I don't know what happens with their followers or their traditions or whatnot, but these guys don't seem to leave a very good map behind that's clear enough to and not open to the interpretation of proverbs and so forth in order to get individuals on this track, back up the pathway, back essentially in the direct, back the way they came, doing a 180 there. So this is the first time we're treating this, and so we were talking about that. Let's see, running a process. You want to focus on getting direct responses or answers to PCL, even if it's not posed as a question outright. This is what makes our work a systematic process, because you're looking at responses or answers from a computational data bank. These are not random responses, but answers that result from systematic processing taking place internally in the mind due to running our intended PCL. And this only takes place, again, if one is actually in session. And so that's why we put so much emphasis on the available presence in session before to even treating anything of this nature. So the key to running a process is then to produce responses or answers and not to pose more questions to yourself. So if you consider each PCL as like a what is form, so we treat the PCL as a what is form, and then your responses. So whether you're getting it from a co-pilot or you're using the book while still having presence in session as a solo pilot, the what is should be almost essentially inherently behind every one of the PCL directions. Again, we're dealing with this computationally, and so your responses, or we can put your So then your responses in essence would be like it is. So even in terms of the PCL, so we're trying to use a neutral example here for demonstrations, and there's good reason for that. But the PCL, for example, think of a fruit. You might almost even consider that, what is a fruit? Or, we don't want to start going, the way they word things on Jeopardy and so forth, but the way in which this is actually being run in a systematic process might actually not be in the same syntax or in the same kind of vernacular words that you would use in everyday communication. So, think of a fruit, what is it, or what is, think of a fruit, or what is a fruit, all of these ways are basically what we are directing in that, and then of course answering it with the it is. Most of when we start treating, I'm using light examples, when we start treating more intensive subjective processing involving defragmentation of imprints and past incidents and so forth, essentially the more of this rather than this you get in a processing period, the more answering, the more it is this, it's that, the more confronting as it is, you notice that that's hidden in there. The amount of time spent questioning or querying is actually, you're getting more benefit from it. You're going to get greater defragmentation. The more you can, treat an incident, what is taking place in the incident, the more you can actually treat of that incident, the more elements you can treat and confront as it is, the more responses, the more things you're willing to treat analytically instead of avoid, the greater control you're going to have over that area. And so that's just one example of how this is going to essentially apply later as we get into further elements of subjective processing.
The Joshua Free Imprint, JFI Publications, in conjunction with Mardukite Academy and the Systemology Society, present the single greatest breakthrough of the 21st century for all humanity, the perfection of a new standard systemology, a complete map for the way out from the bottom to the top, and your key to being an ascended master in this lifetime. Everything you need is contained in 3 progressive, self-guiding courses: the Fundamentals of Systemology Basic Course, the Pathway to Ascension Professional Course, and the Keys to the Kingdom Advanced Training Course. And each should be studied and applied in their intended sequence and order as displayed in this video. All 3 courses combined are available as 5 standard hardcover volumes, but also as 33 installments, since each single course lesson is also available individually as a pocket-sized manual. The Fundamentals of Systemology Basic Course includes Being More Than Human, Realities in Agreement, Windows to Experience, Ancient Systemology, A History of Systemology, and Systemology Processing. The Pathway to Ascension Professional Course, including processing levels 0 through 6, includes in Volume 1, Increasing Awareness, Thought and Emotion, Clear Communication, Handling Humanity, Free Your Spirit, Escaping Spirit Traps, Eliminating Barriers, and Conquest of Illusion. The Pathway to Ascension Volume 2 includes Confronting the Past, Lifting the Veils, Spiritual Implants, Games and Universes, Spiritual Energy, Spiritual Machinery, The Arcs of Infinity, and Alpha Thought. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course for Processing Level 7 in Volume 1 includes The Secret of Universes, Games, Goals, and Purposes, The Jewel of Knowledge, Implanted Universes, and the Supplementals Systemology Biofeedback and Systemology Procedures. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course Processing Level 8 in Volume 2 includes Entities and Fragments, Spiritual Perception, Mastering Ascension, Advancing Systemology, and the AT Supplement, Systemology Piloting. All titles are available from your favorite bookseller. Explore new standard systemology today, and may you never be the same.